film project, I decided to do a video essay on Rod and his essential role in the horror movie Get Out. So, in the film, Rod is the comedic relief character in a film about racism and fetishization, and he is introduced to be this character that is all-knowing and kind of does what everybody does during a horror movie, where it's like, don't go in that room or don't go to this place. From the very beginning, Rod tells Chris not to go to Rose's family. He says because Rose has never dated somebody that's black before, that it's not a good idea to go to her family because they might not know that Chris is black. And Chris doesn't think of this as a problem at first, but once Rod puts it in his mind, he becomes more conscious of it and more cautious of it. So, with Rod's warning, this incites a paranoia that Chris starts to experience. With this, as well as a car crash scene at the beginning of the movie where Rose and Chris wreck into a deer, both of those combined make Chris feel uneasy before even going to the house. So no longer is it going to his girlfriend's house to meet the family and have a fun time. It's now something more sinister and something bad will happen or is currently happening. So we also see that Chris might not be looking into everything as much as he should be without Rod, and Rod enforces this even further. So once Chris meets Rose's family, he meets Missy, the mother, and she ends up hypnotizing him into no longer smoking. And Rod and Chris are on the phone, and Chris tells Rod what had happened, and he says that he's not smoking anymore, so it might be a good thing. And Rod warns him that anything could have happened, that letting his guard down is an awful idea, and he needs to leave as soon as possible. And without this conversation, Chris might have never found anything wrong with it. He might have found it strange, but he might have not found it dangerous. So with Rod's warnings, again, Chris now sees this other side of the story, and he becomes more cautious and more paranoid, and he starts seeing more and more things wrong in the house, with Georgina unplugging the phone or Walter running into him at the garden. And these things don't just seem strange anymore, but they seem sinister. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, as Chris is looking for things that are wrong that he would have earlier overlooked. In the film, there is a party scene with Rose's family, and they're there to see Chris and meet Chris, and Chris doesn't know it, but they're there to kind of scout him out and see how good he is, see who will get his body, and they're preying on him. And throughout this scene, they're complimenting him, but upon further inspection, this complimenting seems more like praying. They tell him that black is in fashion, and people who are black are just faster, stronger, etc. And Chris is on edge due to what Rod had put in his mind. If Rod had never put the paranoia in his mind, he wouldn't have known, or he may have not picked up on, they aren't actually complimenting him. They are preying on him, and they are trying to fetishize him and things like that. Without Rod, he may have been completely oblivious. So it comes to the question of if Chris would actually be able to escape without Rod, and the short answer is no. He wouldn't know he needed to. It would have been too late for Chris to find out something was wrong, and he would have been trapped, and he wouldn't have known how to get out. He wouldn't have known he needed to, where Rod told him before he had even went to the house that it was a bad idea. So he had went in with an idea that he should be on the lookout for things that might be wrong. If Rod had not implanted that thought, he wouldn't know to escape, and he had to have been told that something was wrong. Chris also would not have been able to physically escape without Rod. Without him, who knows who else would have came after him. Now the family would have known to come after him. the family was still there and still alive, whereas Rod came at the right time and was able to take Chris with him. Rod, throughout the film, had a essential role and was the one saving grace of the film. Rose and her family were incredibly persistent on Chris. They had told him that they were completely fine that he was black. In fact, they even seemed to, I mean, of course, they did like that he was black, but they even were telling him that they would have voted for Obama again if they could have. They loved black culture, everything like that. And they seemed accepting on the surface, which is what Chris wanted. Chris was worried they wouldn't accept him because he was black, but in fact they're doing the opposite. They are very welcoming because he is black. So he may have ended up conforming to them in their ways of, he might think they're strange, but he might have changed his behavior and adapted to them for this acceptance to continue. Rod was the singular voice that was against this family, and without Rod, Chris had no other voice of reason. Finally, an overview, Rod saved the day. If Rod had not warned Chris in the first few scenes, Chris would have overlooked everything that was happening. He would have seen it as odd, and he would have seen it as just a family that's unlike his own, so he would have tried to conform and become accepted by them. Rod was the singular voice that was telling Chris, no, get out, you need to leave, it's dangerous. So Chris knew what to look for. Chris knew that maybe something was dangerous and maybe he needed to be on the lookout for something that was dangerous. Rod was a major plot point. It is often overlooked as a plot point of stubbornness and reason, and he's overshadowed because he has funny lines and he's seen as just comedic, but he truly is the one hero of this movie.